I'm going to give you some more assistance on how to prepare the first part of your JFK assignment, the form that you need to paste into the discussion board. Now, you're going to have to do this part of the assignment while you are mindful of the requirements in the instructions. So we're going to be going back and forth between the instructions and this form. And let me use the voice of Sherlock Holmes because I want to make it clear that you as a student are supposed to be doing this, that is, someone other than me, so I will speak in the voice of Sherlock Holmes. Very funny. To copy this as Sherlock Holmes, I have to copy this form and submit it properly. So, first of all, I will highlight the form in its entirety, as so, holding down the mouse key, highlighting it, and then right-click and copy. Next, I click on Start a New Thread, enter the subject, and copy by clicking on the mouse, Control-V, or paste. Now I'm going to have to replace this goal because this is not one of the possible goals in the assignment. The assignment has been updated since last spring. Very interesting. So I need to get this out of the way, this example, because it's not an example, it is my thesis. Now let's go back to the instructions to see what are the three choices provided for in the assignment. But I'll want to keep this window open, so I'll want to create another window to the assignment. Now I simply go back to the link in content, course content, and here are the instructions. Now notice that the question that you have before you is this particular question. Using primary and source documents and identifying 10, 8 of which are from the list below, describe and analyze the extent to which the times in which he lived made it likely that Lee Harvey Oswald alone killed JFK. And this can be boiled down to this question: what evidence shows that Oswald alone could have killed JFK? You must pick one of these three for that portion of the form we just looked at, the top of the form. As an example of a student, I will not decide for myself, Sherlock Holmes, which of these three I want to use until after I read all of these sources. Once I have done that, then I can decide which one of these I want to argue for, the one that I think has the most claim to persuasiveness based on those documents. So, what will I pick? Oswald's personal proclivity for violence and search for personal fame? His awareness that his enemies used violence, and therefore he saw violence as a legitimate tactic for him to use against them? And the evidence Oswald collected on November 22nd that has not been persuasively rebutted. Well, of course, you may want to mention in your essay that there are elements of truth to all three. But for the form portion of this assignment, which is the first part of the assignment due, you must select and concentrate on only one. So let's say that we pick for our purpose this second one, Oswald's awareness that his enemies used violence, and therefore he saw violence as a legitimate tactic for him to use against them. You would then paste this into the form. Go back to the form, and you remember the form is on the topic discussion board, pieces of evidence. We've already opened it up down here. Here it is again, and what I would recommend that you do is you pull this little tab down, and that way you'll have a bigger canvas to type on. So you would remove this and type Control-V, and then you have your new thesis statement in here, and I would make it bold-faced like it was before. Now, of course, you need to replace all of these items with the items you're going to use from the list that are appropriate for this particular position. Let's go back to the list. Here is the list again. Does Oswald's game talk about violence as an influence upon Oswald? Well, you'll have to read it to find out. Lee Harvey Oswald, background and possible motives. you would select the examples there of how Oswald saw violence as a legitimate tool. Actually, there isn't a whole lot in here about that particular topic. You won't find anything here about the evidence collected on November 22nd. That would be in Chapter 1. So if you do choose that third position, this would not be all that helpful either. In Marina Oswald's testimony, you might find where he justifies the attempt to shoot General Walker. Marina explains what his justification was. This particular document on April 21st, U.S. decides on slaying, Castro says. Let's open that up. It says the United States has abandoned plans for a second invasion of Cuba in favor of a plot to assassinate Cuban leaders, Premier Fidel Castro said in a speech early Saturday. Now remember, this was April 21st. We know that Oswald read this newspaper on April 21st. It seems likely that he read this article. He had tried to shoot General Walker just a few days before, and so he was a would-be assassin. This might have made him think he could help Castro. And it says that the United States is planning to kill Castro, using violence to achieve their aims. Oswald's aims were the opposite of Kennedy's. His aim was to help Castro. This might have made Oswald think that violence was a legitimate tool, given the nature of the Cold War. George de Morenschildt's Warren Commission testimony, does that deal with the question of Oswald's proclivity for violence? Only the passage where he talks about his amazing guess that Oswald was the one who shot at Walker. De Mohrenschildt did not know that, but he poked fun at Oswald when he saw him after the shooting and asked him, "Lee, how could you have missed?" De Mohrenschildt thought that he was kidding when he was implying that Oswald was the one who shot at Walker. But Oswald's reaction showed de Mohrenschildt that perhaps he was actually the one who shot at Walker. That part of the testimony may be interesting to you. This document, of course, also relates to the question of whether Oswald knew the United States was trying to assassinate Castro. This document has Castro warning Kennedy that two can play at that game. And Oswald may have seen this as a suggestion from Castro that he used violence against Kennedy only a few weeks before the assassination. We do not know if Oswald saw this article, although because it was in New Orleans, and he lived in New Orleans, and we know he read the paper from time to time, he may have done so. But it is a guess. And of course, this CIA memorandum is referring to this particular article, where Castro warns Cuba that assassination is a game that two can play. Some of these documents do not seem to appear to relate to the question of Oswald's proclivity for violence. For example, the evidence collected on November 22nd is often discussed in this article, but does he also discuss the question of violence? Perhaps he does, in which case this article would be something you would want to include on the list. This particular one focuses on November 22nd, so that would only be valuable if you chose option number 3 in the list of 3. But suppose we wanted to include this on the list. You would copy this line and then go back to the form and include it on the form. Well, of course, it's already here, but let's suppose it wasn't. Then you would eliminate this and Control V, and there it is. And then you would have to identify it as a primary source, just as is done here. And you fill out the rest of these lines exactly the same Clean it up so it is neat, and then click Post. And that's how you complete the assignment, the first part of the assignment, which is due in just a few days.